Hello again, boxing fans. I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly, and you're watching The Neutral Corner for the week of March 19th. Okay, so we're in a little bit of a lull in the boxing schedule this week. We had a little bit of action last weekend, a little bit this weekend, but nothing to get too excited about. But we're coming up to some good stuff at the end of March and into a very loaded April. But there's a lot of news and notes to talk about, so let's get into the ring walk. Okay, so we had a few buzzkills, starting with David Lemieux, who was supposed to make his ring return. You know, a lot of fans were excited to see how he'd look coming off that loss to Golovkin, where he showed a lot of guts because he went in there and gave it his all. He fought a guy that a lot of people don't want to fight. And people were so interested that this fight, David Lemieux's comeback fight, was going to be on American television. Fox Deportes picked it up. But David Lemieux missed weight. And his opponent decided, hey, you know what? I didn't bust my ass to make weight to fight a super middleweight. So no, we ain't doing this. So the rest of the card went on, but David Lemieux, the main event, did not go down. For David Lemieux, this is a really big disappointment. He won over a lot of fans in that dominant loss to Golovkin. Even though he lost every round, he won over a lot of fans for taking the fight, taking it seriously, giving it his all, and really, really fighting brave and going for it, going out in the shield pretty much, right? And he really could have built upon that. I'm not saying this was a huge fight, but it was a comeback kind of fight where it was set up for him to have a nice win, and it was going to be featured on American television. And of course, there in Montreal, where he's a big name. Really, really bad letdown for David Lemieux, and a really, really just a blown opportunity for him. Speaking of blown opportunities, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., quote unquote, injured his heel, right, if we believe that, and he's pulling out of a fight that was supposed to happen with Badou Jack. That fight was not signed, sealed, delivered. It was not confirmed, but that's who they were looking to fight. What I find interesting is even though Chavez was quote unquote training, and you know, those of you who saw some of the videos going around social media, he wasn't training very damn hard. He left camp a couple times. His father said he needs to quit and retire. But through all of that, they didn't confirm, the promoters did not confirm that fight, because I think secretly deep down inside, they kind of feared something like this was going to happen. Look, for Chavez Jr., bye-bye. It's just, we've had it. He's not a true fighter. He just doesn't want this. What's the expression? You don't play boxing, you live it, you breathe it. Chavez plays boxing, and you can't play boxing and succeed at the highest level. You just can't do it. So we're done with him. Speaking of a guy who is done, shouldn't be fighting, Zab Judah. He had a fight scheduled last weekend. You know, I talked about that. You know, I really wasn't that excited to see it. Wasn't going to watch it. That fight was canceled. The difference with this one is it was canceled because the paperwork that was turned into the commission was, I guess, phony. The commission, they didn't really go into detail, but there was issues, right? I don't know if something was fraudulent or what, but not only was that main event canceled, the whole damn card was canceled. So, you know, and the promoter, I believe, was suspended by the commission. So it's a big deal. We're going to hear more about this after an investigation, after a hearing that I think is coming up within a month or something like that. And we'll hear more about the situation. But that really sucks because the whole card, all those undercard fighters who bust their ass and train, it affected them as well. So just one of those things, man, where it's like your actions affect the livelihood of the people around you. You know, for David Lemieux, it wasn't just him that missed out on that payday and that opportunity. It was his opponent, right? Same thing with Zab Judah, same thing with Chavez Jr. and the people that were trying to work with him and train him to get him in shape. You know, they spent their time and energy on him, and he lets them all down. So look, your actions affect those around you. But anyway, let's talk about some positive news, okay? The Showtime and slash PBC schedule that's been announced for the spring and the summer. And some of the fights are on Showtime. Some of the fights are on, I think, Fox. I think some of them are on Spike. There's a few different, back and forth. CBS, I think Thurman Porter's on CBS. But Showtime itself has a really nice lineup. They're talking about Santa Cruz, Frampton, and that fight's probably going to take place here in the USA, I believe, in Los Angeles, from what I'm hearing. And two big heavyweight fights. Charles Martin's going over to London to fight Anthony Joshua. That fight sold out in 90 seconds. That's a can't-miss knockout either way. It's going to be a really good heavyweight fight with a great atmosphere that bleeds through the screen, because the fans over in the UK, they're probably the best fight fans. They're among the best fight fans as far as the atmosphere they provide at their events. And Povetkin is finally going to get Deontay Wilder, and Wilder is going over to Russia. So that's going to be a very, very interesting fight. I think it's going to be boring, and it's not going to live up to expectations as far as the action in the ring, but it's a very, very important heavyweight fight. Everyone, when they saw this schedule announcement of all these fights coming up, they got very, very excited, as did I, because it was like, hey man, Showtime's back in the boxing business. PBC's back in the boxing business. They've got some good fights coming up. This is great. But as I started to really, really think about it and started to really dissect some of these fights, and then I started to listen to some of the other podcasts out there and shows that I listen to in the boxing world, there seems to be kind of this settling down of the initial reaction, and fans are starting to talk, and it's like, is it really that this schedule is that spectacular, or is it that the bar has been lowered that much? I think it's the latter. I think that you look at this schedule, let's just take the Showtime fight specifically. It's not an amazing, spectacular schedule. It's what you'd expect for paying for a monthly subscription to Showtime. Those are the fights you expect, right? Now, the PBC stuff, you're getting that on free TV. So you can be more excited for that because you're not paying for it. But the stuff we're getting on Showtime, it's like, this is what you were supposed to do over the past 2 years, where you fed boxing fans shit and charged them a monthly fee to subscribe to your network. So good fights, but not spectacular fights, right? We go back 10, 20 years, a lot of these main events would be co-features, if not most of them. Let's think about that. So, let's not get too crazy, right? Thinking about that Thurman Porter fight, it's an important fight that needs to happen. It's two American stars. One potential crossover star in the making in Keith Thurman, and one of the real good guys in the sport in Shawn Porter, who stayed busy with an exhibition fight last weekend, while Keith Thurman has been sitting idle. He's been quote-unquote injured from a car accident. He's been very, very frustrated with the business of boxing. So I don't know if his mental focus is there. Shawn Porter's is... And I'm starting to think he's going to pull off that upset, but I'm holding off on that prediction. But anyway, just looking at that matchup, I don't think it's going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be a fight that is ugly as hell, that has a lot of holding, that is going to be, it's going to be just another in a chain of fights like that in recent times. Important fights, interesting matchups that just don't live up to the expectations. And in my view, it's going to kind of be a poor man's version of what a Terrence Crawford-Victor Postol fight would look like. Now, I say poor man's version because Crawford-Postol would be the two top fighters in their division, unifying titles, creating a new lineage, establishing a real true champion in their division. And the winner of that fight, not only number one in their division, but on the cusp of being pound for pound, if not, Crawford's pretty much there already, but the winner of that fight is ready for maybe a pay-per-view or something, a high-profile fight, right? Thurman Porter, they're not establishing the number one in their division. I don't see the winner of that fight hitting the pound for pound list, unless it's some dominant second round KO or something, which isn't going to happen. I think it's going to be an ugly fight like a Crawford-Postol, but I don't think it's going to be as impactful on the sport. That's why I compare those two. But anyway, I mentioned Crawford Postal, so let's switch over to HBO. Some more buzzkill news. Since Ruslan Provodnikov made the jump from HBO over to Showtime, and just to be clear, he's not a PBC fighter, but he fights some of the PBC guys, and he's going to be fighting John Molina, a PBC fighter, later in the summer on Showtime. Top Rank was targeting Provodnikov for a Terence Crawford fight this summer, and they were going to bring that out here to the Forum in Los Angeles. So when that fell apart, when Provodnikov moved over to Showtime, Terence Crawford is kind of without a dance partner, and Bob Arum has made it clear that he wants to keep him busy this summer, and because of the money, the guaranteed contract, and the guaranteed purse that Terence Crawford's supposed to get, HBO Boxing and their budget, and HBO Sports budget overall is down. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's down. It's been cut. They're not going to pay out the money unless it's a big, big name or something. But for a summer fight with Crawford, especially considering the schedule that Showtime has this summer, and you're going up against that, they're not paying for it. So Bob Arum has got to take Crawford's summer fight to pay-per-view. Now, I know that's upsetting. And for people who subscribe to HBO, they've had a really shitty start to the year. And I really don't know what their business plan is. And I think they're banking on the eventual Kovalev and Ward fight, and the eventual Golovkin-Canelo fight, which will be pay-per-view, but those will be very, very high-profile fights. They can stack other cards around those, right? That's generally how they package those big pay-per-views. Generally, they're followed with a HBO Boxing doubleheader or something. You know, it's usually a week after. If you look, they kind of schedule a few cards around those big pay-per-views. And I think that's kind of what they're banking on, but I don't know if those fights are going to happen this year. So HBO, man, really struggling. But it just brings up this whole thing about guaranteed contracts. And, you know, look, the promoters, when they do that with fighters, sometimes they have to go pay-per-view. And let's be clear, for Bob Arum to make enough money from a pay-per-view to pay Terence Crawford what he wants, he's only got to do about 100,000 buys. And they'll do that. So they'll make their money, they'll be happy. But if HBO goes into a deal with a fighter, doesn't have to be Crawford, it could be any fighter, and they say, we're going to give you this much money, you're going to fight this often on the network, blah, blah, blah. Unless that fighter is willing to take less money, if HBO's budget or Showtime's is compromised and they can't pay out the money, that fighter's got to go to pay-per-view, or they sit idle. So you run into it's a scenario where you could be one of those guys that just sits on the bench like Andre Ward does. You could be one of those guys that, to stay busy, does occasional pay-per-views, like Terence Crawford, it looks like, is going to be one of those guys. Or you could be a guy that's willing to take a pay cut and accept less money to fight a lesser opponent and stay on HBO airwaves, which is what Gennady Golovkin has been doing the past couple years, right? So those are your three options. It's up to you, boxing fans. Which option do you like the best, you know? But one thing is clear. If you're subscribing to HBO for boxing right now, it sucks. And hopefully toward the end of the year, they can rebuild that. Couple other quick news and notes. Celestino Caballero. I don't know if some of you guys remember him or not. I want to say he was a bantamweight champion. He might have won titles in a couple different weight classes, if I remember. Little fighter, very tall little fighter. Got busted with 10 kilos of coke in his car. So he's going to jail for a very long time. Now, I don't know if that was his coke or he was transferring somebody else's coke, but yeah, that's not going to end well. So I guess he just didn't save his money. But, you know, stories like that, man, sad, sad stuff. But, you know, man, it's a mixture of good and bad this week, some of the news. But overall, it's just been a lot of buzzkills and stuff like that. One quick thing before we get into the fight reviews, previews. I'm going to address this in a video, but I've had a couple of people on this channel and also on Twitter and stuff like that question why I tend to tweet out and write about and talk about and make videos about more Golden Boy fighters and more K2 Promotions fighters or events than other fighters. And specifically, you know, I guess I've been tweeting out stuff about Golovkin and, you know, ticket sales and stuff like that, but not Andre Ward. And I'm going to address that in a video that's going to also be out this week, so be on the lookout for that. I need enough time to fully address that. So check that out, it's coming up. But for now, let's get into the fight reviews of last week's action. So last Saturday, two big fights of note. They were title fights that, that's all I can really say about it. In Germany, Juergen Braehmer, I'm probably butchering that name, scored a unanimous decision over Edward Gutschnacht. I have no idea how to say that name. This was for the WBA light heavyweight title, and Braehmer, he defended the title, won a unanimous decision. This was actually a rematch of a fight they had in 2013, which the German Braehmer also won. Look, this German guy, he has a title. He's fought every one of his fights in Germany. Every one of them is underwhelming, very technical, and he fights in completely controlled situations over there. You know, the German promoters over there, they have deals with the TV networks and certain sanctioning bodies, especially the WBA, love to work with them because they get those sanctioning fees. So there's just a ton of these titleists over there. And this is just reminiscent of like what Felix Sturm did in the middleweight division for a long time. I tend to give Sturm a pass for the first few years of it because he got robbed in America against Oscar De La Hoya. But you know, these guys, there's just a line of them that we can go back. Sven Ocht, right? We can go back to him. These guys that win a title and just fight in these controlled situations and win decisions and defend their little title, sometimes 10, 12 times. And, you know, I just don't care about this fight. I don't give a shit. This guy with the light heavyweight title, Juergen Braehmer, is he going to fight Sergey Kovalev? Would he fight Andre Ward? You know, would he fight Adonis Stevenson? Is he going to fight anybody we give a shit about? No. So he's a non-factor. So that's why I just, you know, I don't cover every fight. I don't talk about or write about every fight or tweet about every fight because to me, this fight, it doesn't matter. But in Liverpool, England, Terry Flanagan won a unanimous decision over Darry Matthews. And this was a rematch from their prize fighter fight a few years ago. This is for a WBO lightweight title. And, you know, this is just, I feel like this episode's really fucking negative. This is the negative version of the neutral corner, but this fight sucked. And we've just had too many of these lately where the fight sucked. And nobody was expecting this to be a fight of the year candidate. I told you guys last week, I thought it was going to be competitive, and it was competitive early on. But it was very ugly, a lot of holding, a lot of fouling. Flanagan was penalized a point in the 8th round for a forearm. To his credit, he didn't repeat the foul, you know, but he chilled out a little bit in the later rounds and kind of coasted. But it was just an ugly fight, and to me, inconsequential. I like Terry Flanagan, and sometimes styles make fights. And we'll see where he goes from this. You know, maybe he's still a young guy coming up. This is a learning lesson for him. But just an underwhelming fight, man. Underwhelming performance. That's it for the big action last week in boxing. Let's get to the previews of this week's action coming up. So there was actually a PBC card on right now as I'm recording this that just wrapped up. There was, I believe 4 prospects fought, undefeated prospects. They all got knockouts, and it was one of those Fox Sports 1 cards. But the fights this weekend, Friday the 18th in Philadelphia, Jesse Hart, an undefeated American super middleweight prospect. He's 19-0, 16 knockouts. He's going up against Dashon Johnson, a guy who's 19, 18, and 3, but is probably better than his record suggests. Looking at Hart, he's 26, 6'2", Philadelphia fighter. Had a pretty good amateur career. 85 wins, 11 losses, 2012 Olympic alternate for the United States. He was a Golden Gloves champ. And he's the son of former pro middleweight Eugene Hart, who in the 70s was a pretty exciting middleweight and threw with a lot of power, always in exciting fights, right? So Jesse grew up in a boxing family, and he's promoted by Top Rank, and they know how to build a prospect. And this guy is fighting Dashon Johnson. Again, not the best record, but he's been in there with a lot of prospects, a lot of up-and-coming prospects. He's one of those guys that kind of serves as a learning lesson for prospects coming up. He's only been stopped twice in his career, and I think one of those was a corner stoppage or something like that. But the only real stoppage was to J-Rock, to Williams, who fought last week, a couple weeks ago actually, another Philly fighter. So this should be a nice test for Jesse Hart, I think, and it'll be interesting to see him. Unfortunately, it's not on television. Now, what I don't know, I couldn't confirm, I'm not sure if this is going to be streamed on Top Rank's website, but they usually do pretty good about stuff like that. So you might want to check out Top Rank's website, Twitter page, and find out. I'm not quite sure, but Jesse is a guy you should take a look at because he looks pretty good. He's a good-looking prospect so far. Saturday is a return of a couple of fighters, and there's one prospect fighting that you guys need to keep an eye on. But the card's in Houston, and Juan Diaz, Juan Baby Bull Diaz, you guys remember him. He had some titles at lightweight going back a few years, and then he kind of retired to finish up his college degree. And he's made a couple of little comeback stints here and there. Well, he's coming back against a Mexican fighter, Fernando Garcia. Look, for Baby Bull Diaz, he hasn't fought since September of 2014. But his opponent hasn't fought since October of 2014. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't know what weight this fight's supposed to be at. And that's going to be the most interesting thing to me. I don't understand why Juan Diaz would come back. I think, he lost kind of the luster over the last couple years of his career. He took some losses, and he just wasn't the same guy. He didn't have that same hunger. And, maybe he's coming back to have a few fights in front of the hometown fans. He's from down there in Texas. I don't know, but I don't see him coming back and marching toward a title or anything like that. I think that's past for him. Another comeback that I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this one, but Mike Alvarado is coming back off that bad loss to Brandon Rios last January in Denver. I was ringside for that fight. I was actually in Denver all week for that fight. He's making a comeback against Saul, Corral, a Mexican fighter, fighting for the first time in the United States. For Mike Alvarado, look, I've been quiet about this in the past, but it's pretty much, I think, public knowledge now. It's been out there. He had a coke problem. He had a drug problem. And when I was out there in Denver last January, just talking to some people he sparred with at the gym, people close to the camp, going to the press conferences and stuff for that fight, the weigh-in, dude looked like a zombie. Just seeing him hit mitts, seeing him jump rope, he looked horrible. He looked drunk, It was clear. If you've ever been around anybody with substance abuse problems, you can see it. You see the warning signs. The dude had problems. Now, it's been over a year. Apparently, he's cleaned himself up. We'll see. I still think he's young enough to where he could have a few more good fights. I don't know if he's going to make a title run or anything like that, but he could maybe work himself into a title shot and get one more good payday. But I do know this, that, promoters are going to be weary of this guy, and even other fighters are going to be weary of him because, if he signed on for a fight, he's the type of guy, if there's substance abuse problems, he could pull out last minute, there could be issues. So he's going to really have to prove himself. He's going to have a couple of these fights if he really wants to get back in. But we'll see how he looks in this fight. I don't know what weight this is going to be at either, and that's another thing. What does he come in weight-wise? That will say a lot about this. So 2 comeback fights that I don't think we necessarily need to see, but, they're good guys, and they've really put on entertaining, good fights for the fans over the years. And if they want to make a comeback, they deserve that. You know what I'm saying? So I wish them the best, and we'll see how they look. But on the undercard, Brazilian prospect Esquiva Falcao. I'm probably butchering that name. 12-0, 9 knockouts. Really good-looking middleweight prospect. He was in the World Series of Boxing. And back when I used to cover those cards, when I first started on the beat here in Los Angeles, I used to cover the World Series of Boxing events here in LA because we had a team here, the LA Matadors. And Falcao was part of that World Series of Boxing thing. And he was actually in the 2012 Olympics and won a silver medal for Brazil. He's got a lot of tools, and it's going to be interesting to see, you know, how he progresses. He's going up against American Joe McCreedy. You know, there's actually two Falcao brothers, and I think he's the better one. And, you know, middleweight, we need more middleweight prospects. We need more super middleweight prospects. You know, those divisions are top heavy, and there's now a lot of talent coming up right now. So, you know, with Jesse Hart, with Falcao, you know, I want to see those guys and see them develop quickly. But that's it for this week. It's a pretty light week. Coming up next week, we'll preview the Andre Ward-Sullivan-Barrera fight, which I think is actually going to be a pretty damn good fight. It's probably going to be Andre Ward's best opponent since Carl Froch, his best opponent in almost 5 years. So we'll see how he looks. But I'm excited for that one. I'm actually excited for that one. So we'll preview that next week. You know, as always, like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the fights.